I got interested in the golden rule about 40 years ago in graduate school. Can you hear me well? Yes. So I did my master's thesis on the golden rule and then my doctoral dissertation, and then it's been a big part of a lot of good number of books and articles and websites and classes and so forth. But this is my first golden rule conference, so this is something new. This conference illustrates my first point, that the golden rule, like a diamond, reflects a different beauty from different perspectives. And you can study the golden rule from so many perspectives, from different world religions, different philosophies, different historical periods, different sciences. You can study it from the standpoint of literature or movies or practical areas like being a good doctor or nurse, or being a good parent, or teaching children right from wrong. Now, my particular perspective on this is logic, which will be a little different from the other papers, I think. I think it provides an important part of the puzzle that's been missing up till now. Logic is about forms of valid reasoning. This is a simple example of a valid logical inference. All A is B, this is A, therefore this is B. You can use a form like this. If the premises are true, the conclusion has to be true. You can use a valid form of inference like this to prove things and also to test consistency. Let me take an example of that. Years ago, I used to have a beard. And I would regularly run into people who would do these general insults about bearded people. All bearded people are crazy or whatever. And I would always test their consistency. I would say, well, Abraham Lincoln and Jesus Christ had beards, right? Yeah. Were they crazy? No. Oh, you've contradicted yourself. Your belief system doesn't fit together anymore. You've got to change something. I think basically the golden rule works that way. If I treat someone in a given way, and yet I'm not willing that I would be treated the same way in the same circumstance, then my attitude system clashes with itself. And if I'm to be reasonable about it, I have to change something. Now, there are also invalid principles of inference, like all A is B, this is B, therefore this is A. And to show it's invalid, you can use a particular example which highlights that. For example, all parrots are birds. True, this is a bird, let us say, therefore it's a parrot. Now, might be some other kind of bird. Now, my beginning logic students, I give a pretest the first day. And I give them simple examples of valid and invalid inferences and ask them to tell me the difference, which is which. And they do very badly. But after a little bit of practice, they can get it pretty well. In most cases, it's not really controversial what's valid or invalid. And you test it by looking for clear cases. Another example, suppose we say all in New York, all in the state of New York are in the United States. You're in the state of New York, therefore you're in the United States, valid. But if we say instead, you're in the United States, therefore you're in the state of New York, doesn't work. You might be in Connecticut or Lord knows where. Okay, now the first application of logic to the golden rule may seem to be rather detrimental to the golden rule. The normal formulations of the rule pretty quickly lead to absurdities. And here I distinguish two of them, which I call pyrite 1 and pyrite 2. Pyrite for fool's gold. It glitters when you look at it, but after a little bit of analysis, it says crazy things. And you really can't use it as a good guide to life. Pyrite 1 says if you want X to do A to you, then do A to X. Now, under a wide range of circumstances, this works pretty well. Namely, if you're in fairly similar circumstances to the other person and you have pretty good desires. It'll work pretty well. You know, I want you to be polite to me, so I should be polite to you. But if either of these two conditions is lacking, you are apt to get into big trouble. For example, pyrite 1 entails if you want Dr. Davis to remove your appendix, then remove her appendix. Not a very good idea. Pyrite 1, which I sometimes call the literal golden rule, assumes that how you want to be treated in your individual situation is how it's good to treat other people in their situation, which may be a very different situation. To give another example, suppose I'm a waiter at a restaurant and I hate broccoli. That's a matter of truth. I do. I hate broccoli. And let's say that Andrew is a customer and he orders broccoli. You like it, right?
I like it.
He actually does. He told me that. How this can be, I have no understanding. But now, following the literal golden rule, should I serve him broccoli? I don't want people to serve me broccoli, so I shouldn't serve him broccoli. I'd probably get fired, and he would be a little peeved at it. Pyrite 1 can also lead to absurdities if you have flawed desires. Let's say that Andrew eats his broccoli, maybe at Klein cafeteria there, and it's diseased broccoli. And it momentarily screws up his brain. And for a while he wants everyone to hurt him. Okay? He wants everyone to hurt him. Treat others as you want to be treated. He should hurt everyone else, right? Not a very good idea. Okay. Pyrite 2 is an improvement over Pyrite 1. Pyrite 2 brings in the idea of a reverse situation, but it doesn't do it very well. Pyrite 2 says if you want X to do A to you, if the situation were reversed, then do A to X. So you'd ask what you would desire if you were in the other person's place. So suppose I'm the waiter again. I would ask, if I were in his place, would I want to be served broccoli? The answer is yeah, he likes it actually. So I would serve him broccoli. So Pyrite 2, with the reverse situation idea, handles different situations much better. But it still fails when people have flawed desires. Let's say I'm part of a den of thieves. Okay. And my good friend, who's a thief, wants me to help him to rob a bank. And he says, if you were in my place, you'd want to be helped to rob a bank, right? Therefore, you should help me to rob a bank. Okay? That's Pyrite 2. It can tell you if you do bad things. It assumes that how we want others to treat us, or how we would if we were in their place, is a good desire. And if so, it'll work pretty well. But you can have bad desires too. Another example along these lines is the famous example from Immanuel Kant, which we've heard a few times, I think, about the judge and the criminal. Okay, this time assume that Andrew is a very dangerous criminal. He kind of looks that way. Okay. And to protect the rest of you, I want to send him to jail. Okay, but he's a real smart guy, and he appeals to the golden rule. He says, if you were in my place, you wouldn't want to be sent to jail, right? So I can't send him to jail by the golden rule, by Pyrite 2. Okay, so he's going to be a danger to the rest of you. Now, because of examples like these, and Gert Green mentioned in the first talk a lot of examples from Gert, and there are just tons of examples in the literature like this, just huge amounts. Because of this, most people in philosophy, which is my field, don't think much of the golden rule. They think that it's kind of a little folk principle and sounds good, but once you try to analyze it, it utterly falls apart and it's really no good. So you can take an ethics course and not even hear the golden rule. So it's stupid principle, sounds good, but really no good once you think about it. Now, I'm of the opposite opinion. I think it's really a good principle, but I think it just needs a bit more reformulation. And my reformulated version, I humbly call Gensler's GR. And it says, treat others only as you consent to being treated in the same situation. Now, there's a lot of subtlety beneath that wording. And I will explain that in the next 3 slides. So hang on. But before we get there, I want to give you kind of an intuitive feel for how it works. Okay, how would I apply this? Suppose I'm treating someone else in a given way, and I want to see if I'm following the golden rule. Well, I would first of all try to understand what I'm doing to the other person, get my facts straight. How are my actions affecting the life of the other person? And then I do a little bit of role reversal. I put myself in the other person's place and imagine myself on the receiving end of the action. And then I'd ask, am I willing that if I were in that exact place, then I would be treated that way? If I'm not, and yet I do it to another, then I'm violating the golden rule. And what then? Well, I'm inconsistent. My favorite example of an application of the golden rule is from John F. Kennedy, and you might hear this.
The heart of the question is whether all Americans are to be afforded equal rights and equal opportunities, whether we are going to treat our fellow Americans as we want to be treated.
You heard that somewhat. Somewhat. That was John F. Kennedy. Thank you, Jack, in his very Bostonian accent. This was from a speech in the early 60s. It was on the occasion of the first black enrollment at the University of Alabama. And President Kennedy was pushing for radically new civil rights law. And he appealed very strongly to the golden rule. In fact, the whole speech is, for me, a very nice example of how you apply the golden rule. First of all, he talked about the facts. How are white people treating black people? And he said they're treating them as second-class citizens, and he talked about segregated restaurants, and blacks couldn't vote, couldn't run for office in many places, and they couldn't go to the best educational institutions like the University of Alabama, and they couldn't get the best jobs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So he first of all had an analysis of what was happening, the facts. And then he instructed white Americans to do a little bit of role reversal, to imagine themselves in the exact place of the black people who were being treated as second-class citizens on that basis. And then he asked the golden rule question. Are white Americans willing that they would be treated that way? Here's how I would formulate the golden rule question. Am I now willing that if I were in the same situation, then this be done to me? Now, this is the first of 3 slides designed to handle some of the subtle aspects of the rule. First of all, GR involves imagining yourself in the other person's place. So again, I'm a waiter who hates broccoli, yuck, which I do, and thus don't want it served to me, but Andrew orders it. Can I serve broccoli to a customer who ordered it on this version of the golden rule? Well, I hope so. What I would ask is, am I now willing that if I were in the same situation, then this be done to me? Am I now willing that if I were in his exact place, actually liking the stuff, then I would be served broccoli? And I'm sure I'm willing that if I were in that situation, that would be done to me. That's really not a problem. The second slide in the series is a little trickier, and this one is really key. The golden rule, GR, involves a present attitude toward a hypothetical situation. It's not how you would act, how you would desire if you were in different circumstances. The difference here is very subtle. And my favorite way of explaining it is by a very concrete example. Little William, he's my nephew. When I did this example, he was 2 years old. Now he's about 12. Okay, but imagine him 2. And when he was visiting my dad, he would love to put his finger into electrical sockets. Of course, he really didn't know what he was doing. He didn't understand electricity. He was just exploring. But we were very opposed to that idea. You know, we didn't want to lose him. So what do? Well, you try to lure him away gradually, you know. But that didn't work. So eventually we would drag him away, kicking and screaming, discipline him on that and say, don't do that. He didn't understand what we were doing, but at least, okay. Now, does the golden rule let us discipline him? Not if we phrase it wrongly, like in Pyrite 2. In Pyrite 2, you would ask, if you were in the place of little Will, would you want to be disciplined? The answer is no. Therefore, you shouldn't discipline him. So he'll fry. So the problem with Pyrite 2 is many, actually. The correct way to ask it is this: am I now willing that if I were in the same situation, then this be done to me? Am I now willing, given my present understanding, and I know about electricity and so forth, am I now willing that if I were in his situation as a 2-year-old, I would be prevented, by discipline, prevented from being fried? The answer is yes, sure, of course I'd be willing that if I were in that situation, it would be done. I'd be disciplined. So the advantage of this formulation is that you don't fry your kids. This distinction is really crucial, and it also applies to the notorious judge criminal case. Again, there's this dangerous criminal, Andrew here, and I'm the judge. I want to sentence him to jail to protect all you guys. And he says, if you were in my place, you wouldn't want to be punished. That's like if you were in the little kid's place, you wouldn't want to be disciplined. Okay, therefore I shouldn't punish him. That's the wrong way to say it. That will lead you to fried kids and to freed criminals and all kinds of things. The proper way to ask is, am I now willing that if I were in the same situation, this be done to me? The judge should be able to say, yeah, I believe in the law, and it protects people. And I'm perfectly willing that if I do the horrible things that he did and become a danger to society, that I be locked up. Okay, so the judge could be consistent in sentencing him to jail. Okay, that's kind of subtle, and people almost always get that wrong when they say the golden rule. The third slide, this is kind of subtle too. GR forbids an inconsistent action-desire combination. Satisfying golden rule consistency does not guarantee that your act is right. It's not an if-then. It doesn't tell you if you have these desires, then this is how you are to treat the other person. If you formulate it that way, then in cases where you have horribly screwed up desires, it will tell you to do horribly screwed up actions. So instead of that, it's a consistency principle. It blocks a certain combination. It's kind of like when I asked the person who insulted bearded people, did Abraham Lincoln have a beard? Yes. Was he crazy? No. He's contradicting himself. He's got to change something. One offshoot of this is that the golden rule doesn't replace ordinary moral principles like tell the truth or don't steal. It's on a different level. It's on a consistency level. It tells you when you're being inconsistent. It's not meant, in my view, to be a general ethics, to cover everything. It's meant to poke you at times when you're inconsistent, as in the Kennedy case. Okay, my example for this is this coal mine owner. Okay. And I use that because I taught for a few years in eastern Pennsylvania. And I heard all these stories about the coal mine owners of about like 150 years ago. They would amass huge fortunes and pay their workers almost nothing. And I heard so many stories about how bad they were treated, almost like slaves. So this is my example. He says, I grow rich with my coal mine while paying my workers only $1 a day. And we ask him, we give him the golden rule challenge. Are you willing that if you were in the place of your workers, you would be paid only $1 a day? And let's say he says yes. And he says yes because he thinks that $1 a day is a lot of money. If you get $1 a day, you can live well, you can eat well, you can have nice clothing and nice house, etc. He's wrong. But that's what he thinks. So he's consistent given his skewed view of the facts. So how do you bring him to a greater wisdom? Well, you attack. You help him grow beyond his present view of the facts. So you might, for example, give him $1 and say, let's go to the grocery store and let's see how much you can buy. And he soon, let us say, learns that you can't buy a whole lot. That if he were in the place of his workers getting $1 a day, he'd have a pretty miserable life. So he says, no, I'm not willing that if I were in that situation that I be paid that much. And then he's in trouble because he's violating golden rule consistency. So the golden rule, on my view, is not a regular moral principle. It tells you what to do. It tells you when you're inconsistent. And sometimes it needs to work together with other principles to get you to move toward a wider wisdom. Sometimes you're consistent, but your view of the facts is totally wrong. So you need consistency, you need to get the facts straight, you need imagination, maybe you need a few other things working together. Golden rule is a team player. Okay. Now, what kind of inconsistency are you committing when you violate the golden rule? You don't have a logical inconsistency in your beliefs. You don't believe it's raining and it's not raining at the same time in the same sense. It's more an inconsistency of will. Let me give another example of that. Suppose, again, that poor Andrew, he'll get a chance to get back at me, though. Suppose that poor Andrew wants to become a doctor. That's his goal. And he believes that in order to become a doctor, he's got to study hard on his courses, get good grades. But he doesn't do it. Then there's an inconsistency of will. He has a goal, he has certain beliefs about how to achieve it, but he doesn't act accordingly. Inconsistency of will, another kind of inconsistency. Is that what's involved in the golden rule? Not exactly, but kind of a cousin of that. When you violate the golden rule, this gets a little complicated here. If you're really logically inclined, it'll all click in your mind. You'll say, cool. And if not, you'll be kind of, and maybe read it over later and make sense out of it. This appeals to two notions, two kinds of consistency. One is conscientiousness, and by that I mean a harmony between your moral beliefs and how you live. And it also appeals to another kind of consistency, which I call impartiality, which is to make the same the same evaluation about the same sort of case, regardless of where the individuals are in the situation. Okay. Now, this argument tries to show that if you're conscientious and impartial, then as an offshoot of that, you have to follow the golden rule. But I use a concrete example. Then you won't steal Dietra's bicycle, unless you're willing that your bicycle be stolen in the same situation. Now, how does that follow? I hope I don't lose you. Well, if you're conscientious, that is, you have this harmony between your moral beliefs and how you live, you won't steal her bicycle unless you believed it would be all right or permissible for you to do it. Okay? But if you're impartial, you wouldn't believe it would be all right for you to do that to her unless you also believed it would be all right for the same thing to be done to you in the same exact imagined situation. Okay? And then if you're conscientious, again, you won't believe that it would be all right for that to be done to you unless you're willing that this be done to you in the same situation. So if you're conscientious and impartial, you'll follow the golden rule. You won't act to steal her bicycle unless you're willing that your bicycle be stolen in the same situation. I hope you got that somewhat. This is a simplified version of a wider theory of consistency. And if this were a longer talk or session, you'd get the full-fledged theory, which has to do, it's a logical theory about consistency, and it would include things like logical consistency in beliefs, ends means consistency, consistency between your actions and your moral beliefs, consistency about your judgments about similar cases, and the golden rule. The golden rule, in its proper formulation, drops out as a theorem of this wider system. It's all very logical. It's all, you can put it in symbolic logic too. One of my books has that. Now, I've been speaking throughout of the golden rule, which is wrong. Even in my paper, there are three. gold 1, gold 2, gold 3. And there's a footnote in the paper that this system can generate over 6,000 variations on the golden rule. I will spare you. I will not go through all 6,000. But it's a family of related principles instead of just one principle. But life is short, so I focus on just one of these. Applying the golden rule in a rational way requires knowledge. You got to understand the facts as well as you can, especially about what you do and how it's going to affect the lives of other people. It involves imagination, the ability to put yourself in the place of the other person, which is a skill more enhanced really by literature and movies and that sort of thing than by really science or logic. And then it sometimes involved rationalized desires. Sometimes our desires are screwed up when we apply to the golden rule. I gave the example of the coal mine owner. He said, yeah, I'm willing that if I were in that situation, I would be paid $1 a day. But his desire was based on wrong information because he thought that with $1 a day he could live real well. So you have to sometimes criticize the desires. The interesting cases are where people are taught to hate people of another group when they are young. And they're told lies about this other group. Those people over there, let me tell you about them. And the people you know and respect hate the group, and they tell you lies and distortions and so forth. So you grow up really hating the group. And that's going to impair your ability to follow the golden rule. So you need to sometimes rationalize your desires. How do you do that? That's a long story, but it involves knowing your past, understanding yourself. How did I get these desires about these other groups? Was it through lies or distortions and stereotypes and that sort of thing? And if I expand my awareness of the group, I get to know the group in a good way, maybe I'll find that they're not really so different from my group, and my animosities will decrease. That's sometimes important in applying the golden rule, though I don't want to stress that because that's a long topic. Let me give 3 examples. The coal mine owner, let's say that he becomes a convert to the golden rule and he wants to run his coal mine on golden rule grounds. What will he do? Well, the first thing to do, he's got to have knowledge. He's got to learn about his workers and especially, but also maybe the neighbors, maybe the customers. What are their problems and issues? How are they affected by how the company is run? So you got to know the impact of your actions on the lives of other people. Then you do imagination thing. You imagine yourself as a worker or perhaps as the next door neighbor with all this black smoke coming into your house or whatever. And then you again ask the golden rule question. Am I willing that if I were in that situation, I would be treated that way? Here you have a doctor examining a little boy. Let's say you want to be a pediatrician. And you want to be a pediatrician who lives the golden rule. What do? Well, you got to learn a lot about children, really. Their medical problems and issues, yeah, but also their personal problems and issues. What kind of anxieties do they have? And what are different ways doctors might deal with them? And so you got to gain a knowledge of the people. And then you do imagination again. You remember that you were once a small child at being examined by a doctor and you were afraid or something, I don't know, and then apply the golden rule. Third slide is a mother and a daughter. And suppose the mother wants to apply the golden rule to how she treats the daughter. Well, first thing to do is gain knowledge. Understanding through dialogue, through conversation, through trying to get into the skin of the other person in a way. That's maybe too graphic. But understand the daughter's problems and issues, what makes her happy, what makes her sad, or what future possibilities does she have. Now, you're probably saying this is impossible to actually know a daughter. Well, you can do it better or worse. That's the thing. Only God can really know our inner hearts completely, how things affect us, the facts, be completely imaginative, be completely consistent, etc., etc. In a way, in striving to follow the golden rule, we're striving to imitate the wisdom of God. Okay, so you get to know the daughter as well as you can, realizing that you'll never do it as well as you would like to do it. And you put herself in her place, imagine what you were like as a daughter, and you know what it would be like to be treated different ways in her situation, and you try to apply the golden rule. Now, several speakers in this conference have said that you can only apply the golden rule toward equals. And I kind of jumped when I heard that, but I kept hearing it from people. None of my examples are between equals. If you're the head of a coal mine and you're thinking of how to treat the workers, you have a real hierarchical society there. It's maybe not like a caste system, but maybe it is like a caste system in some ways, actually. When Northerners were attacking the Southerners for having slaves, some of the Southerners were saying, well, what do you call that? Okay. So I think you can apply it where people are in radically different situations, as long as you can imagine the situation of the other person and ask, how am I willing that I would be treated in that situation? The golden rule is not a compass, but a path. A moral compass is something you whip out and you see which way it points, and there you go. Is the golden rule like that? Sorry, there's probably no such thing. Life is more complicated than that. The golden rule is a path you have to walk. It's a difficult path. Sometimes it's a hard hike. I'm a hiker, so I love these hiking examples. You got to get to have knowledge. You got to develop your imagination, put yourself in the place of the other person. You have to strive to be consistent, follow the golden rule. Sometimes you have to criticize the junk you were taught from like a racist society, and which impairs your desires. My last slide says the golden rule can be embedded in different frameworks. So far, I have not given a complete theory of the golden rule. I've talked about certain logical aspects. I'm talking about a formula and how you formulate it in a way to avoid absurdities, so that it doesn't tell you to remove your doctor's appendix, for example. And I've said how you would apply it in a rational way to some like typical examples of real life. I haven't said why you should follow it, and I haven't said what should motivate you to follow it, and I haven't put it into a larger worldview, whether religious or philosophical or both. Golden rule needs all that. But this is a short talk. That would take a long time. The important thing about, the neat thing about the golden rule, one of its beauties is that you can fill out the rest of it in a lot of different ways, depending on culture, depending on background. So for example, a Buddhist, when a Buddhist talks about the golden rule, you might hear a lot about karma, maybe reincarnation, maybe the no-self view, although prior to yesterday I thought that was a more important structure in Buddhism. Talk to a Christian, you probably won't hear those things. You'll hear the fatherhood of God and the family of man, or you'll hear about love your neighbor as yourself, or the example of Christ, or how God has first loved us and how we're called upon to love him in gratitude. So you'll hear different things. Imagine that you're on an airplane. Airplane examples seem to be necessary here. Okay, I'm a Christian, this guy's a Buddhist. And we both give up our seat or move in order to have the family be together, three of us. And we both do that because of the golden rule. And let us say that we formulate it in exactly the same way. We may or may not, but let's suppose we do. We formulate it in exactly the same way. We act in the same way in the concrete situation. We give up our seat or move. So we're the same? Not really. If you push it further, there's going to be big differences. He's going to talk about karma and reincarnation, things like that. I'm going to talk about more Christian things. You might imagine, to further the plane example, that there are a whole lot of people of different religions in the plane, including some secularists who really don't have any religion at all. And they all give up their seats. They act in the same way, they have the same principle, wording the same way, but the context is very different. So is it the same rule? In a way it's the same, in a way it's very different. There's this duality here. Now how about the philosophical issues? Why should we follow the golden rule? And why is it a good rule? What should be our motivation? Well, let's say that person in one row believes in self-evident ethical truths. Basically, you just know the basic principles of morality. They're built into your mind. And the golden rule is self-evident, the person says. Or maybe the more basic rules of consistency from which the golden rule is derivable are self-evident. And the person might say, what's my motivation to follow the golden rule? I just want to do the right thing. It's very Kantian. The person in the next row thinks we justify moral principles by a kind of rational procedure. You try to understand the situation as well as you can, get your facts straight, be consistent, put yourself in the place of a lot of other people, etc., and then see how you want people to live. Then look at your desires. And this person might follow the golden rule out of rational consistency. The person might say, well, consistency and thus rationality demands that I live that way. Another person, the next row, we're going to run out of the plane pretty soon, might think that God's will creates the moral order. Prior to God's decision, there's no right and wrong. And the person might follow the golden rule as the law of God out of love of God, or perhaps obedience to God, or perhaps gratitude, or perhaps fear of punishment, hope of reward. Although I put that kind of low. Some other people seem not, I don't know, whatever. Another person might follow the golden rule because of its social usefulness. A person might say, it's a good practical rule to help people to live together and cooperate and promote everyone's good as far as possible. And why do I follow it? Well, because I care about the good of people. I'm concerned about people. Another person might follow it because it's a social convention of our society. Some people think that moral principles are just social conventions. They're kind of arbitrary, or maybe not completely arbitrary. And the person might follow it out of unthinking conformity. I was just taught this, that's the way I live, that's it. I'm not advocating necessarily all of these. I think that is supremely dumb. But I'm not sorting through these. That's a job for another occasion. That's not now. Or someone else might say that the bottom line in terms of what moral standards you accept is just how you feel. Does this moral principle fit my feelings? And the person might say, well, the golden rule fits my feelings. I like to act this way. That's all the justification you're going to get from me. Or another person might appeal to self-interest. The person might say, how are you going to run your life? You're going to be wrapped up in yourself, or you're going to reach out to other people in terms of something like the golden rule. If you're wrapped up in yourself, you're going to be miserable. The way to be happy is to reach out to other people. People who argue this way sometimes say that the contrast that you often see between doing good for yourself and doing good for others is vastly overdone. That the best way to do good for yourself is to do good for others. That you'll feel better about yourself, others will respect you, etc., etc. So there's a lot of different frameworks that the golden rule could be part of. Is this important? I think it is. Because we live in a very pluralistic world. If you go on the plane, you might not find examples of all of these, but you'll find examples of a lot of them. And how are people to live together in a pluralistic society, let alone a pluralistic world, where people have radically different philosophies, different religions, totally different ways of looking at it? Well, the golden rule offers the possibility of a rule that different groups could have in common, but for radically different reasons. And it provides what the political philosopher John Rawls calls an overlapping consensus. So we don't all, follow the Golden Rule because we're all Christians, we're all Jews, we're all this or that, or we're all, believe in self-evident truths, or whatever, but for different reasons. And that I think is pretty significant. Let me end with something a little simpler. A few weeks ago, I was asked to give a talk on the Golden Rule by Jeff Waddles, who had just left to catch his plane, I think, if it's 3 o'clock. Yeah, he wrote the book called The Golden Rule, which more than anything, I think, inspired this conference. And I think it's really a goldmine of ideas. And he asked me to give a talk to a little church group at his church, so Sunday morning. So I came there and I was behind the podium with a handout, kind of like this, but a little simpler. And I was behind the podium, and Jeff went behind and drew the blinds. And I asked him, Jeff, why did you draw the blinds? And he said something like this. Since he's not here, I can make up anything, right? No, I can't, no. I wouldn't want him to do that to me. So he said, if you're sitting here, it's real glaring and distracting because of the light from the outside. And so I said, oh, and I went and sat down where the people were going to sit. I wasn't putting myself in their shoes, I was putting myself in their seat. And I said, yeah, he's right. And I thought, what a marvelous example of the Golden Rule. Very instinctive. He probably didn't apply some complicated formula or something. It's kind of built into him. What's the moral of the story? You need Golden Rule instincts. Fooey on Golden Rule analysis. I've been wasting my time for the half hour here. No. I think they both work together. The analysis can help guide the instincts, and even more, it can help defend the instincts from objections like the absurd implications and so forth that are based on not understanding the Golden Rule well enough. So I think that the two can cooperate.